And, I was at a program honoring the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and it was really nice. It was a nice program. Um, Very nice. But I want to talk about what I remember. I remember the day that Martin Luther King Jr. was unalive. I was 7 years old, living in Chicago, Illinois. I could remember my grandmother, Sonora Carter, rest in peace, crying. My mom, aunts, uncles, cousins, all of us around the TV. Hater butt files. They were crying, yelling, screaming. They killed King. They unalived King. They wanted him unalive. What we gonna do now? Then we couldn't go outside because they were rioting. I was a little kid and I'm thinking, oh my God, some things that you never forget as a young child. I could remember thinking, wow, they did that. Like, they killed this man, my grandmother, everybody in the house was crying. Then they were rioting. We couldn't go outside. And again, I'm going on memory of what I remember. So can't nobody tell me anything different. The rioting went on. They were burning down everything in Chicago. It was a sad time. I can also remember looking at his funeral on TV and his wife, Coretta Scott King, holding the baby. I remember growing up and they were trying to say everyone that was with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. the day that he was assassinated, to later in life realize that King was shot. But then you had a nurse that confessed that King was still living and he was smothered to death. Just for, you fact checkers, there's a site of Politico, because there was an assassination trial. So just for you people, just to work, to tell y'all what happened. King was taken to St. Joseph Hospital. He was in the emergency room. They were working on him in the emergency room. The chief of neurosurgery, a head neurosurgeon, a doctor named, oh Lord have mercy. Okay, Lord, I need my glasses. Breen Bland, who was also the family doctor for the Dixie Mafia family, the Atkins family, came in with two men in suits and told the people, stop working on that Nigger, get out and just let him die. Wow. The last one to leave the room was a surgical nurse. Her name was Shelby. And as she was leaving, she heard them gathering spit up in their mouths like this, and then caught, and that caught her attention. So she turned around, looked over, and then she saw them spit on the body of Dr. Martin Luther King. Saw Dr. Bland pull out the catheter and take a pillow, put the pillow over his face and suffocate him. You can do your own research. And there was an investigation, Investigation points to FBI conspiracy to silence Martin Luther King Jr. So they had people thinking that everybody that was with King had something to do with his unaliving. But, of course, it was the government. There was, hey girl dad, there was a civil trial. So you can do your researches. You can do your research. How you doing, girl dad? And so, yeah. And so, there was, like I said, a trial. So do your research. Martin Luther King was alive. And the nurse did confess that she saw the doctor pull out the catheter and smothered him. And so you can get the transcripts of the trial. You can get the transcripts of the trial. You don't have to believe me. But I just remember as a little girl seeing the effect that it had on my grandmother, and my family, because everybody believed in King. My grandmother was a Christian woman, and she just so believed in King. She believed in him, Now, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a great man. Don't get it twisted. He fought for civil rights. They did the Montgomery boycott. that lasted over a year. It didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen overnight. It took some time. So don't get it twisted. That boycott lasted over a whole year. What I also grew up to realize is that Dr. Martin Luther King realized that he had took his people into a burning building. Hold on for one moment. So Dr. Martin Luther King, he had realized that, yeah, I'm having a great weekend. I just came from a program from King, and I'm just telling what I remember. And I'm just saying, what King said, and he feared, when King said, I fear I may have integrated my people into a burning house. Do your research on that. Dr. Martin Luther King had realized that integration wasn't right. His words was, we have fought hard and long for integration, as I believe we should have. And I believe that we will win. But I have come to believe that we are integrating into a burning house. I'm afraid that America has lost the moral vision she may have had. As the nation is not deeply concerned with the plight of the poor and disfranchised. This failure, King argued, would only further stroke the anger and violence that tears the soul of this nation. I fear I am integrating my people into a burning house. Yeah, it was too late. Yeah, girl, Dad, and I'm glad you realized this, because when you try to tell people this kind of stuff, they want to argue with you, they want to tell you. But he realized that he had been used, and he had taken us into a burning house. I believe that, if we would have followed Malcolm more, I believe we would have been better. That's just my opinion. They have Chinatown, Greek towns, every town, but they don't have Black town. Yeah. They don't have Black towns, And sending us in to be integrated, we should have been separate. I believe we would have been further advanced in the world. We would respect each other more. we would have policed our own community more instead of trying to be like them. But like you said, it was too late, you know. It was too late. And so, you know, he was a man of great honor. He got out there and he risked his life. He was a great preacher. He used the Bible. I remember being in college and doing an essay on the letters that he sent from the Birmingham jail, you know, when he was in jail, and he wrote letters to all of the pastors saying, hey, this isn't right. We're all supposed to be God's children. So, but I'm glad that, you know, he did his best. He did what he thought was right. He did that. And so we're going to just look at a quick little video of Dr. King.
Dr. King was born in Atlanta on January 15th, 1929, down on Auburn Avenue. And Dr. King grew up in a household with his parents, Martin Luther King Sr. and his mother, but also his grandparents, the Reverend A.D. Williams and his wife. Now, the Reverend Williams had become the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church on Auburn Avenue. And that becomes the family church. So it's the church in which Marty King grows up and is raised. Now, Dr. King himself is educated in the public schools of Atlanta. He goes off to Booker T. Washington High School here in Atlanta before getting to matriculate at Morehouse College, which is where his father had gone to school. After Morehouse College, Marty King decides to go off to seminary, and he attends Crozier Theological Seminary up in Pennsylvania. After Crozier, he goes to Boston University. In Boston, he meets a very attractive young woman. Her name is Coretta Scott. They get married, and they debate what to do. Coretta Scott King was not interested in returning to the South. Martin King was. So he interviews at several churches and is tendered an offer at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery. They have a child, and then the bus boycott occurs.
Eventually, segregation in public transportation will pass away. And I think we should start now preparing for the inevitable.
King is recruited to be the head of the Montgomery Improvement Association. He takes on that responsibility after much prayer and thought. Now, in Montgomery, the effort to organize for the protest results in success with the bus boycott's conclusion in 1956, but also the desire to keep the protest going. So in 1957, the pastors involved in the Montgomery Improvement Association, by this point Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Reverend Ralph D. Abernathy, the Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, these figures, joined by others, will organize what's called the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The SCLC will be organized with the purpose of taking this protest regionally and leading civil rights reform in America. In February of 1960, Martin Luther King and his family moved to Atlanta. King accepted the co-pastorate of Ebenezer Baptist Church under his father, and the family moved into a house on Boulevard. Now, King would then go on from his position at Ebenezer Baptist Church to lead the civil rights movement. In August of 1963, civil rights leaders gathered in Washington, D.C. A. Philip Randolph had proposed what was called a March on Washington for Jobs. And the point was for black people to come to Washington and insist that they be given equal access for employment. Thousands came. And it was a peaceful demonstration, occupying the nation's capital for a day to listen to speeches being delivered from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial on the National Mall. And among those speaking were Fred Shuttlesworth, John Lewis, who was the chairman of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. But the person who stole the limelight, of course, was the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., whose I Have a Dream speech captured better than anyone ever had before the goals and aspirations, not just of black people, but of everybody.
Freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Do you have any business in the courthouse? The only business we had was to come by to the Board of Registers to register. The Board of Registrars is not in session this afternoon, as you were informed. Came down to make a mockery out of this courthouse, so we're not going to have it.
After the Civil Rights Act and the March on Washington, attention turned to the voting rights and the denial by white governments to register black voters. But the climax occurs in Selma, Alabama, where in the middle of Alabama's Black Belt in the old plantation district, black people had been denied access to the ballot. And Dr. King and SCLC will support the demonstrations there. So coming in to work with SNCC in Dallas County, Alabama, SCLC will organize protests around the county government that was refusing to register black voters. This culminates in what's called the Selma Campaign of March of 1965. Now, Dr. King is not there on Bloody Sunday when John Lewis and Hosea Williams lead a march out of Brown's Chapel AME Church across the Evan Pettus Bridge and are beaten by Alabama state troopers. All of it captured on film, all of it broadcast around the nation and the world, all of it leading to a Selma to Montgomery march that Dr. King did lead. And indeed, President Johnson did propose and the Congress did pass that voting rights legislation. King comes back to Atlanta, meets with his advisors in SCLC, and he says, we've got to organize the poor of our country and promote human rights. And he sets forth an agenda for what's called the Poor People's Campaign. King came back to the notion of occupying the nation's capital, encouraging the poor people from across America to come to Washington, D.C., and to remain there until the system opened up and addressed their needs and their concerns. This wasn't for black people only. This was for white people, for Native Americans, for Asians, for everybody. And he encouraged them all to come. So it fit when in Memphis, Tennessee, black men who were working as garbage men, cleaning the streets, when they went on strike to demand a living wage. Now, Memphis, Tennessee, and next to the Mississippi Delta, the big plantation area, the agricultural South was full of poor people who were unemployed and needing work. And so in Memphis, the city leaders didn't pay workers very much money because there was always somebody out there who would do the job for less. And those garbage men went on strike, and their motto was, I am a man. And they stood up to say, we deserve a living wage. They asked King to come support them. How could he not? Living wages for working people. It fit the objectives of the Poor People Campaign. And so he goes. And it's there in Memphis, Tennessee on April 4th, an assassin shoots him down on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel, bringing to an end his life, but not his legacy. That Poor People's Campaign was held in Washington, D.C. The Reverend Ralph D. Abernathy assumed the presidency of the SCLC, and within weeks of Dr. King's murder, his widow, Coretta Scott King, would begin promoting the idea of a Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change, which might forever teach the values of that Kingian nonviolence that he promoted. So his legacy continues. It continues in the King holiday we have every January. It continues in the drive for human rights, in the building of civil rights memorials at all of these venues where the demonstrations took place. So that legacy is still with us today. A legacy of advocating for equality, for economic justice, for international peace, and for human rights.
Well, there you have it. And so, for me, that's why I will always vote. I will always vote. You know, your vote does count. But due to the fact is that people marched and were beaten, bully clubbed, and everything else, for the right for me to vote. That's why I will always vote. And so, you know, Dr. Martin Luther King, you know, was a great man. He risked his life. He died young. The entire King family, I mean, they just had tragedy. I mean, his mother was unalived. It was a lot of tragedy with the King family. A lot. But the fact that this man gave up his life, left his wife and children to make this world a better place for all people of all races, color, creed, religious or political background. He believed in nonviolence, and he was for the poor. And so, Dr. Martin Luther King, I still remember the day that you were unalive, the effect that it had on my grandmother, parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, everybody just crying. I can remember the rioting, and it was a sad day, a very sad day. I will also vote because too many people marched and sacrificed for me to have the right to vote. I want to thank you all for joining me tonight on this show. It's just a brief show, nothing long. But King did realize that he had taken his people to a burning house. America was not ready to integrate. But that work was not in vain, because hopefully people will look at the old videos and they will see what he believed in, what he believed in his heart, that we should have the right to have everything that other Americans have. We should not be treated any different due to the color of our skin. This is April Showers, and I want to thank you all for joining me for remembering Dr. Martin Luther King.